Hey everyone, welcome back. Today I am going to be sharing a video that I don't know why I haven't shared it before, but I was making a loaf of bread last week and I thought I need to share this with you all because sometimes, well, most of the time, I don't follow a recipe for bread. I will just kind of get in there and I have a formula that I use to make a quick loaf of bread, or if I just don't want to have to going through my recipes, I will do this. So I'm going to share my formula with you of how you can make a loaf of bread without a recipe. So let's jump right into this. So it's true, if you just have a simple formula, you can make any loaf of bread. Sourdough, yeast, sourdough discard. It's just a simple little formula that can have you making a loaf of bread really quickly without having to look through your recipes. Now, I realize most people are going to use a recipe, but if you are like me and you're kind of the type person that kind of flies by when you're baking or cooking and you kind of a little here, a little there type person, this might be the perfect formula for you. So I wanted to share it. So the way that I go about this is I work out my liquid ingredients first. And so the liquid ingredients I use is for one loaf of bread. Usually when I'm doing this type of a bread recipe or not recipe, it is for one loaf of bread. So it's always 1 cup warm water, not hot, just lukewarm water. So 1 cup of water goes into your stand mixer or your mixing bowl. And then what I like to do is do all the liquid ingredients first. The flour, I don't measure, and I'm going to tell you how I do that in just a second. So I put my water in. If I'm using sourdough starter, I put that in. If I'm using olive oil, which I usually do for sandwich loaves to soften it, I put that in. If I'm using honey, I don't think I did on this particular day, but you can put that in. The amounts that I do is for the olive oil, I'll do 1 to 2 tablespoons and 1 to 2 tablespoons of honey if I'm using honey. I always use olive oil in a sandwich loaf, but let's say 1 to 2 tablespoons of olive oil, 1 to 2 tablespoons of honey. Now you've got your liquid ingredients. Don't put in the salt just yet, and don't put in the yeast just yet if you're using yeast. And the reason I'm saying that is because I use freshly milled flour and I'm going to let it soak. If you're just using all-purpose flour, then go ahead and put your flour and your salt and your yeast. So how do we go about getting the flour right? All right, so far in my mixer, I have a cup of water. And for this particular recipe, I'm doing a sourdough discard. And I have half a cup of sourdough starter. I have roughly 2 tablespoons of olive oil. And now I'm going to put some flour in. I've got freshly milled flour, and I like to soak it for 30 minutes. So like I said, if you're using all-purpose flour, when you get your flour the right amounts, you can go ahead and add your salt, yeast, whatever else, and then finish the kneading process. So the way that I work out how much flour that I'm going to put in a recipe like this, or not recipe, I keep saying that, is I just add 2 cups at first, and I start my mixer on a low speed, and I just keep adding about a 1/4 cup of flour at a time until I get a ball of dough that cleans the sides of the mixer bowl. I don't want to go beyond that because then I know it's going to be a dry, crumbly loaf. I want it to be very moist, but not so wet that it's still sticking to the bowl. So just add a little at a time until it comes together and it's not sticking anywhere on the mixing bowl. You can do this with a dough whisk in your just a large mixing bowl, whichever that you're going to use, but you just want a soft, moist ball of dough that doesn't stick to the sides of the mixing bowl. Once you get that, if you're using freshly milled flour, you're going to let it soak for 30 minutes and then come back to it. If you're using all-purpose flour, then you can move on. So after 30 minutes, I come back and I add yeast and salt. Now, if I'm doing just a strictly sourdough loaf, I don't add the yeast. I just add my salt at this point. So I add my yeast and salt, and I mix it or knead it on speed 2. You can also do this by hand for about 10 minutes. What you're looking for is a soft, supple, glossy, stretchy dough. That means the gluten has developed properly and you'll get a good rise and a good texture with your bread. And then I'm going to put it in a big bowl that's lightly greased, cover it, and let it rise. Now, while the bread is rising, I want to take a minute and do what is going to be probably forever my last sponsored post. This sponsor I had worked out before what happened with my old channel, and they were gracious enough to allow me to go ahead and use this channel to fulfill that sponsorship. So we are going to talk about a coffee grinder, and then we're going to come back and shape this dough and let it go for its second rise. So I want to take a few minutes and tell you about this brand new coffee grinder that AMZCHEF sent over to me to try out. They were so gracious that even though I lost my channel, they still wanted to work with me, and so I'm so thankful for that. But you all saw the video. If you didn't, I have a video where I got an espresso machine, and we are obsessed with iced coffee right now. It is so hot. And it's so refreshing to have an iced coffee in either the evenings or in the mornings. And we drink decaf, so it doesn't keep us up all night. And so we'll have one in the evening sometime, and it's so refreshing. But a lot of you, when I first put that video up on my other channel, were telling me if you really want a good cup of coffee, you need to use a coffee grinder and make it fresh. And so I was able to score some decaf coffee beans and try out this little grinder. Now what I really like about it, because I'm not really used to using a grinder, but it was really simple. This one has all the adjustments, coarse, medium, or fine. It has a timer so that you can adjust exactly how much coffee that you want to come out. It also has a cup selector, so if you want for 2 cups or for 1 cup, and it's really customizable. I noticed too that one of the things about it, and that's one of my favorite things about it, is the hopper is really big, and I just fill it up with coffee beans, and I don't have to fill it up but like every week or something, and so that's awesome. But yes, it does make a difference if you drink freshly milled coffee grounds, just like freshly milled flour. When you make your bread, you can taste the freshness, and you can make out the difference. Like, it doesn't taste stale. It's got a fresh and really nice flavor, and so I really do appreciate them for sending it over. It is beautiful. So sitting beside of my espresso machine, it looks perfect on the counter because it's stainless steel just like the espresso machine, and it has a digital readout that counts down when you start your coffee grinding so that you know exactly when it's going to be done. And also it has a neat little holder underneath that you can close the lid completely on it, and you can save that coffee for the next time that you're going to need it. So again, I want to thank AMZCHEF for sending over this coffee grinder for me to try out, and you all were right. It does make a difference to grind your own coffee and have it fresh, and I'm really enjoying this fresh coffee. All right, so when you are letting it go for the first rise, you want it to double in size. This takes roughly an hour. Could take a little bit longer if your house is on the cool side. Could take a little bit less time if you have a really warm, humid house. So just kind of keep an eye on it. And once it has doubled, I punch it down, and now I'm going to shape it. I do a really simple technique for shaping my dough. I just roll it out with a rolling pin and then roll it back up into a log. I usually hit it against the counter a couple times to make sure all the big air bubbles are out. And then I put it in my greased loaf pan, cover it with like a plastic shower cap, and let it rise until it is like a couple of inches above the rim of the pan. Now with sourdough, sometimes I will catch it at like an inch because it takes quite a bit longer for a sourdough loaf to rise than a yeast loaf. But once it gets to that, I'm going to preheat my oven to 350 degrees, and this is for any loaf I'm making. I'm going to put it in the preheated oven for 35 minutes. You want to make sure the internal temperature is around 195 to 205 Fahrenheit, but 35 minutes has always worked for me. So 350, 35 minutes, you're going to get it out of the oven, and then you want to put it on a cooling rack. I usually cover it with a towel that keeps the crust really soft, and let it cool completely before you slice it. Now, as you're going to see in just a minute, when you slice this bread, they had no recipe, just using a basic formula. It is a beautiful, soft, delicious loaf of bread that you didn't have to follow any particular recipe for. And I'm hoping that this is helpful for you all who are kind of like me. I love recipes and I follow a lot of recipes, but sometimes I'm in the kitchen and I don't want to get my books out or go to the computer or whatever. I just want to kind of throw something together, and this makes a really good loaf of bread. Is it perfect? Is it as good as maybe one that has been perfected, the recipe? Well, maybe not, but it's delicious and it's soft and it makes delicious sandwiches and toast. And for me, that is all that I'm looking for. And so I hope this little formula will help you. I'm going to put it down in the description box below so that you can write it down if you want to try this with making bread. If you have any questions about it, let me know. And let me know, are you the type of person who just wants to make stuff up in the kitchen and sometimes not always be following a recipe? Because if you're like that, then we are friends, because I am terrible with always following a recipe. I hope this will help you all with your bread journey if maybe you're wanting to get a little more feel instead of just always having to follow everything to a T. So check that out in the description box. I'm going to put it down there. Again, thank you, AMZCHEF, for allowing me to fulfill my sponsorship. Although my other channel had been taken down, that was very nice of them. And I will leave a link for that in the description box below. All right, well, that is all that I have for y'all today. I hope y'all are doing well, and I hope that you enjoyed today's video. If you did, give it a thumbs up, and yeah, we'll see you on the next video.